Berlin, 1944. Berlin, 1944. Deep beneath the Harz Mountains, 60,000 men are building a weapon that will change warfare forever. They work in shifts of 12 hours, in tunnels carved from solid rock, breathing recycled air thick with chemicals and concrete dust. 1 in 3 of them will be dead within a year. Not from Allied bombs, not from combat, but from the weapon itself. The weapon is the V2 rocket, Nazi Germany's most expensive military project, 3 billion Reichsmarks. More than the Manhattan Project cost the United States in equivalent spending. And here is what no history textbook tells you cleanly. The V2 killed more people making it than it ever killed firing it. How does the most technologically advanced weapon of World War II become its most catastrophic, self-inflicted wound? The answer will make you rethink everything you believe about military genius, wonder weapons, and the psychology of losing. Stay with this channel, because the real story has never been told this way. The crisis/setup. To understand why Hitler poured a nation's blood and treasure into a rocket, you have to understand where Germany stood in 1942. The Eastern Front is consuming 700,000 casualties per year. The British Royal Air Force and the American 8th Air Force are systematically dismantling German industrial cities, Hamburg, Cologne, the Ruhr Valley. In July 1943, Operation Gomorrah kills 37,000 German civilians in Hamburg in a single week. German air defences are overwhelmed, the Luftwaffe is bleeding out, Germany cannot hit back. This is the strategic trap. Germany is a land power surrounded by enemies it can no longer reach. Britain sits at 350 miles away, untouchable, launching bombers every night. The German High Command knows the math. At current attrition rates, the Wehrmacht collapses before 1946. Hitler needs a weapon that crosses distance, a weapon that cannot be intercepted, a weapon that strikes London while German boots never leave French soil. The political pressure is also existential. By 1943, the German public, fed 12 years of invincibility propaganda, is watching their cities burn. Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda has a problem. The narrative of inevitable German victory is colliding with reality at 30,000 feet, one Allied bomb bay at a time. The regime needs a symbol, something to point at, something to say, we are still winning. We have weapons you cannot imagine. Enter the concept of the Wunderwaffe, the wonder weapon. A specifically Nazi idea that technological genius could substitute for strategic reality, that one invention could reverse the tide of a war that logistics and coalition power had already decided. It is, in retrospect, a fantasy. But in 1943, it is a fantasy with a budget of 3 billion Reichsmarks and the personal obsession of the most powerful man in Europe. This is where Wernher von Braun enters the story, the mechanism/the wizard. Wernher von Braun is 30 years old in 1942, and he is already the most dangerous kind of genius, one who does not care what his invention is used for, only that it flies. Born into Prussian aristocracy in 1912, von Braun falls in love with rocketry as a teenager reading science fiction. By age 20, he is already working with the German Army's Ordnance Department, testing liquid-fueled rockets at a facility outside Berlin. He is not an ideologue. He is not a fanatic. He is something in some ways more dangerous, a pure technologist, so focused on the engineering problem that the moral architecture around him becomes invisible. Here is how the V2 worked. The rocket stands 14 meters tall and weighs 12,500 kilograms fully fueled. It burns a mixture of liquid oxygen and ethanol, 75% ethanol, 25% water, so consuming both propellants at a combined rate of 58 kilograms per second. At launch, it accelerates to 5,760 kilometers per hour, 4 times the speed of sound in 65 seconds. It exits the atmosphere, it travels in a parabolic arc through space. It re-enters the atmosphere at terminal velocity. Here is where the magic happens. No fighter plane in 1944 can intercept it. No anti-aircraft gun can reach it. No radar system in existence can give enough warning. The V2 arrives in silence because it travels faster than the sound of its own approach. You hear the explosion first. Then a second later, you hear the rocket arriving. Death moves faster than its own announcement. For Hitler's regime, this is not just a weapon. It is a psychological statement. Imagine you are Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments, in the summer of 1943. You are sitting across from Hitler in the Wolf's Lair. He's just watched a film of the first successful V2 test. One rocket climbing a pillar of fire, disappearing into clouds above the Baltic Sea. Hitler is weeping, literally weeping. He tells you, "This is the decisive weapon of the war, and what I want most is that we use it in quantity as soon as possible." He promotes von Braun to professor on the spot. He authorises unlimited resources. This is the moment the financial catastrophe begins. The scheme in action. The production plan for the V2 is called the Peenemünde program, centred at a research facility on the Baltic island of Usedom. And from the very beginning, it is structured less like a weapons program and more like a Ponzi scheme, constantly requiring new injections of resources to sustain promises it cannot yet deliver. In August 1943, the RAF bombs Peenemünde directly. Operation Hydra kills 735 people on the island, including key engineers. Von Braun escapes. The program does not collapse. It moves underground, literally. The SS, under Heinrich Himmler, seizes this moment. Himmler has been eyeing the rocket program for 2 years. He sees it not as a weapon, but as an empire, a source of slave labour contracts, SS prestige, and political leverage over the Wehrmacht. In August 1943, he arrests von Braun's colleague Rudolf Nabel on fabricated charges. He pressures Hitler to transfer V2 production from army to SS control. By October 1943, the decision is made. V2 production moves to a facility called Mittelwerk, the Central Works, carved into the Kohnstein mountain in the Harz region. The labour force. Concentration camp prisoners from Dora, a sub-camp of Buchenwald. The production numbers tell the story of a regime devouring itself. November 1943. The first V2s roll off the Mittelwerk line. Production target is 900 rockets per month. Actual production, 50. The gap between Hitler's expectations and physical reality is a ratio of 18:1. To close this gap, the SS doubles the prisoner workforce, then doubles it again. By March 1944, 12,000 prisoners are working inside the mountain. Shifts run 24 hours. Men sleep in the tunnels between the rockets because the SS has not yet built barracks. By June 1944, production finally hit 600 rockets per month. And on September 8, 1944, the first operational V2 strikes London. It lands on Chiswick, killing 3 people and injuring 17. The propaganda machine celebrates. Goebbels calls it the beginning of the end for England. German newspapers carry headlines about the Vergeltungswaffe, the vengeance weapon, arriving at last. What they do not print, 600 rockets per month, costs Germany the equivalent of 6,000 fighter aircraft. At the exact moment the Luftwaffe is being annihilated over the Reich, Germany is choosing rockets over interceptors. Every V2 launched at London is a Messerschmitt that never got built. The dark side it gets worse. Here is the number that defines the moral catastrophe of the V2 program, and it is so stark that even serious historians sometimes pause before quoting it. The V2 rocket killed approximately 2,754 people in London, and Antwerp combined during its entire operational campaign from September 1944 to March 1945. In the same period, the production of those rockets killed an estimated 20,000 concentration camp prisoners at Mittelwerk and Dora. You read that correctly. The weapon killed more than 7 times as many people building it as it killed firing it. No weapon system in the history of modern warfare has this ratio, not one. And it gets worse. The conditions inside Mittelwerk are deliberately engineered to be lethal, not accidentally brutal, deliberately. SS Commander Hans Kammler, who oversees V2 production, operates on an explicit calculation. Concentration camp labour costs nothing, and dead prisoners can be replaced from an inexhaustible supply. He schedules production targets that he knows cannot be met without fatal casualty rates. In early 1944, prisoners are dying at a rate of 100 per day inside the tunnels from pneumonia, malnutrition, the caustic dust from cutting limestone, and direct violence. Arthur Rudolph, the Mittelwerk production director, knows the mortality rate. His production logs record it. He chooses not to intervene. The prisoners who survive the tunnels are sometimes hanged in them. When SS investigators discover that 18 prisoners have deliberately sabotaged rocket components, a rational act of resistance, Kammler orders all 18 executed. They are hanged from the overhead cranes inside Tunnel B, their bodies left visible for 2 days as a warning to the remaining workforce. Von Braun is present. He says nothing. Historian Michael Neufeld, in his definitive 1995 biography of von Braun, documents that the engineer toured Mittelwerk at least a dozen times and was fully aware of the conditions. But here is the third reveal, and this one strikes at the heart of the entire Nazi war machine. The V2 was not even an effective weapon against its intended target. A 1945 analysis by the British Ministry of Home Security calculates that the V2's military damage per unit, accounting for the rocket's cost, the manpower to produce it, the fuel to launch it, was approximately 1/7 the damage per unit of a conventional artillery shell. The Allies' own analysts concluded that if Germany had taken the resources consumed by the V2 program and invested them in U-boats, in fighter production, or in artillery shells, the war in Europe might have extended by 12 to 18 months. 3 billion Reichsmarks. The single most expensive weapons project in Nazi Germany's history. And its greatest effect was on Germany itself. The collapse/verdict. The V2 program ends not with a bang, but with a dissolution. In March 1945, with American forces crossing the Rhine and Soviet armour closing on Berlin, the SS begins evacuating Mittelwerk. The remaining prisoners, thousands of them too sick to walk, are loaded onto trains or simply left in the tunnels. Many are executed in a final spasm of SS operational secrecy. On April 11, 1945, American soldiers from the 104th Infantry Division enter Mittelwerk and find what historian Robert Gildayer calls an industrial hell. Tunnels containing partially assembled rockets, abandoned machinery, and mass graves. Wernher von Braun surrenders to American forces with 150 of his engineers. He brings with him 14 tons of technical documents, secretly buried to prevent SS destruction. He becomes the centerpiece of Operation Paperclip, the American program to extract Nazi scientists, and goes on to lead NASA's Saturn V program, putting American astronauts on the moon in 1969. Arthur Rudolph receives American citizenship in 1954. He works on the Pershing missile and the Saturn V. He's not investigated until 1982, when the Department of Justice forces him to renounce his citizenship and leave the United States. Hans Kammler is never tried. He disappears in May 1945. His fate remains officially unknown. Now here is the counterintuitive verdict, stated plainly. The V2 program did not fail because it was too ambitious. It failed because it succeeded at exactly the wrong thing. It solved the engineering problem. Von Braun's team built a functioning ballistic missile, the world's first, and it worked. What it could not solve was the strategic problem. A weapon that kills more of your own people than the enemy's, that costs more than it destroys, that consumes resources needed elsewhere, is not a weapon at all. It is a symptom. 3 pillars define what the V2 actually was. First, it was a political weapon designed to manage domestic morale and Hitler's psychological need for vengeance, not to win battles. Second, it was a bureaucratic empire, seized by the SS as a vehicle for institutional power, with human lives as the currency of that ambition. Third, it was a cognitive trap. Evidence that the Nazi regime, by 1943, had substituted technological fantasy for strategic rationality, choosing the dramatic over the effective, the symbolic over the real. Germany did not lose because it lacked wonder weapons. Germany lost partly because it believed in them. So here is the question for the comments. And there is no clean answer. If von Braun had refused, If he had walked away from Mittelwerk knowing what he knew? Does the V2 program collapse? Does the war end sooner and do 20,000 people live? Or does someone else simply take his place, the machine continues, and von Braun dies in a camp himself? Is a genius who enables a crime responsible for that crime, or is the crime always larger than any one man's decision to say no? Tell me below. The argument is worth having.